absurd things, of wanting to destroy families, of undermining tradition or religion. And I've frequently stated that violence against women, it's violence that destroys families, not attempts to stop it. Now, the key legal tool in preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence is the Istanbul Convention, the Council of Europe's Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. Now, I don't want to steal the thunder of my colleague, the other speaker, but I want to say a few things that she might not be able to say. Now, in my view, progress on accepting this tool, this instrument, this convention has stalled, and resistance is growing. We've seen 0 signatures and ratifications of the convention this year. Early this year, the Hungarian parliament refused to ratify it. They voted on it. The Polish government has announced its intention to withdraw. My colleague 𝗧𝗪𝗡, I'm sure, can tell us more about that. But to me, these 2 examples from Hungary and Poland show that countries that are backsliding on human rights often target women's rights and women's defenders first. So the issue is not only about women, their autonomy, their safety, equality, and dignity, but also about human rights more generally. By strengthening women's rights across Europe, we can help defend freedom more broadly. Now, the convention needs champions. It needs countries that lead the way in implementation and defend it against its detractors and critics. Now, Denmark can be such a champion, but it still has a bit of homework to do. Denmark did ratify the Istanbul Convention early, but it has not yet completely finished bringing law and practice into line with the requirements of the convention. Now, one key area that Amnesty International has highlighted is the law and practice regarding rape. In March of 2019, Amnesty published a report titled, Give Us Respect and Justice, on access to justice for women rape survivors in Denmark. Now, the statistics everywhere understate the problem because many women do not report rape or attempted rape. But even the official Ministry of Justice statistics in Denmark suggest that every year around 6,700 women are subjected to rape or attempted rape. In 2019 only, around 1,000 rapes were reported to the police, but we saw only 79 convictions of the perpetrators. That means only about 1% of all victims in Denmark receive justice through the courts. I think that Denmark can do better. I think that Denmark should be more ambitious in living up to its good name on gender equality. Now, Amnesty and Grevio, the monitoring body for the Istanbul Convention, recommend amending the current definition of rape so that it's based on the lack of consent. And I'm pleased that there is a cross-party agreement in Denmark to amend the criminal code to recognize that sex without consent is rape. And I very much look forward to seeing the draft law, and I very much hope that it does not contain any exceptions for situations in which consent can be presumed, because I think it cannot be presumed. Now, such a law would constitute a big step forward. Survivors, women's groups, and human rights organizations have campaigned for years for such legislation in Denmark, including during Amnesty's ongoing campaign, Let's Talk About Yes. Amnesty would like to acknowledge the courage and resilience of survivors and activists who have shared their experiences and spoken up for a new rape definition in Denmark. Without you, we would not be close to getting a consent law. We salute your bravery and courage on this issue. I urge Denmark not only to live up to its good name on gender equality in this area, but to become a regional champion, to push for ratification and implementation of the Istanbul Convention across Europe, and for countries to change their rape laws so that they're based on the lack of consent. Now, this could fit very well with Denmark's new foreign policy strategy, which was announced earlier this month, which will focus on human rights, democracy, and equality. My message then is the following. We need to do more to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence. One form of violence is rape, And Denmark and other countries should amend their legislation so the definition of rape is based on lack of consent. And they should strive for the best human rights-based practices in providing access to justice. And finally, once Denmark takes this step, it will be well placed to lead on this issue by pushing other states to follow suit and to ratify and implement the convention. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Niels, for these insightful words, and especially for the encouragement for my government, the Danish government. I would now give the word to you, Marceline. Welcome.
Thank you, Helle, and thank you, everybody, for having invited me to be here. I'm very pleased to be here. As you have already pointed out, I am the current president of Grevio since June last year, and Grevio is the specialized independent body responsible for monitoring the implementation of the Istanbul Convention. If you will allow me, I've prepared a bit of a PowerPoint, so I will share my screen, if that is okay. Is that okay? Can you see that? Yes. Okay. So I'll start by pointing out that the Istanbul Convention is the first legally binding instrument to provide for comprehensive measures addressing the prevention of violence against women, the protection of victims, the prosecution of perpetrators, and integrated policies. You'll excuse me a bit, I'm trying to get this thing, okay. In relation to the state of ratifications, which is what I have been, part of what I've been asked to do, the Istanbul Convention has been ratified by 34 out of 47 member states of the Council of Europe, including some countries which are not member states of the EU, of course, such as Turkey, Serbia, North Macedonia, Georgia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. 11 Council of Europe member states have signed but not yet ratified. These are Armenia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Hungary, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Republic of Moldova, the Slovak Republic, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. And the Russian Federation and Azerbaijan are the only member states of the Council of Europe who have not signed the Istanbul Convention. So they have not even signed their intention to ratify. Non-member states of the Council of Europe, we have both Tunisia and Kazakhstan, who have expressed an interest in joining the convention and indeed have taken steps towards the signature of the Istanbul Convention. I have to say that I am having some difficulty, that's why you might hear me hesitating a bit, because I cannot get out of full screen. Why can I not get out of full screen? Nope, that's not what I want, I'm sorry. Okay. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop sharing. You'll just have to make do with my face. Is that okay? Because that is easier. Okay, so as Niels has mentioned, of course, we have had some stalling in a number of signatory countries. The ratification process has stalled, mainly due to the misinterpretation of the scope of the convention. And some of the objections that they have made include that the concept of gender is foreign to many legal systems and is therefore incompatible with the domestic legal norms, that the convention attempts to recognize a third gender or to legalize same-sex marriage, that it challenges traditional gender roles that are beneficial for families and public life or society, and that it has an unjustified focus on women. Now, we've heard Niels talk about in the early days when people used to say, oh, what about the men? What about the men? I have to say, I still hear it sometimes today. What about the men who are victims, etc. And of course, I am concerned with anybody who is a victim of domestic violence. However, as pointed out, the focus of the Istanbul Convention is precisely on women, because we are talking about violence against women, which is violence which is disproportionately affected by women. So as Grevio, we have done our best to address these objections, these challenges, if you like, which have been made, and indeed others. We have tried to challenge the myths and the misconceptions around the convention with very clear messages. Where ratification has stalled, some Council of Europe member states have actually sought the opinion of their constitutional courts in order to assess the compatibility of the Istanbul Convention with their legal framework, with their constitutional legal framework, as is the case in Bulgaria. And there the Constitutional Court found that the Istanbul Convention violated the Bulgarian constitution because it allegedly introduced unclear concepts such as gender and gender identity, which are not in line with the Bulgarian legal framework. In other Council of Europe member states, such as Hungary, which was already mentioned, and Slovak Republic, we've seen parliaments adopt resolutions requesting their government not to ratify the Istanbul Convention. Indeed, there has been a worrying trend in some of the signatories to the convention of misrepresenting the aims of the Istanbul Convention. So we've seen signals emerging about attempts to backtrack on reforms and measures. This includes attacks on sexual and reproductive health and rights, shrinking resources for women's NGOs and support structures, and coordinated movements, all under the anti-gender ideology. Progress has been opposed on gender equality and on women's human rights, because as Niels rightly pointed out, when we talk about human rights, it also includes women's human rights, because women are humans, and that is why it does. And it's also opposing progress on LGBTI rights on the basis of misconceptions and false narratives. And indeed, the convention has been particularly targeted by such attacks. And just to point out that this is not new, because at a conference, I'm sorry I don't have the slides, I didn't manage that, sorry, technical. I had a slide which I used, which I just copied and pasted, which I used at a conference 2 years ago. And that slide says, the objective of the convention is not to regulate family life and or family structures. The convention requires governments to ensure the safety of victims who find themselves in dangerous situations at home or are threatened by family members, spouses, or intimate partners, which unfortunately is the most common form of violence. The convention does seek to change mentalities, to move away from gender stereotypes and sexist attitudes. And the Istanbul Convention is the result of long discussions, eventually leading to its unanimous adoption by all Council of Europe member states. It is based on policies and legislations which are tried and tested and which have produced positive results at the level of member states. So I was already saying, the need was already there for me to say that a couple of years ago. So allow me, however, to move on to the state of play in relation to the monitoring. So the Grevio, as we said, monitors the Istanbul Convention. We've carried out monitoring in 17 states so far, obviously states that have ratified the convention, and we've published 14 first baseline evaluation reports, including, of course, the one on Denmark. And at our forthcoming plenary meeting, which should be in a few weeks' time, we are going to examine, obviously with a view to adopting 3 additional baseline reports. So that would bring the number of reports up to 17. We also published our first general report of activities covering the period from 2015 to 2019. And that's worth a look at because it gives a summary of the work and what we found. We can already see, however, from the reports that we have made, that the convention has already made a tangible and positive impact. For one thing, it's propelled gender-based violence to the forefront of public debate. And as a result, hopefully, it would have increased both victims' awareness and society's awareness of the urgent need to combat. It's also resulted in the introduction of higher legislative and policy standards at the national level in a number of countries. However, of course, there are challenges and recurring shortcomings that have emerged from the monitoring. These include the gender-neutral approach. So in its evaluation on Denmark, on Albania, on Finland, GREVIO indeed criticized the gender-neutral approach in the legal provisions and policy documents that address domestic violence. A gender-neutral approach deflects the focus away from the persisting challenges to the safety of women and children. It also fails to recognize domestic violence as a social mechanism that helps keep women in a subordinate position to men. Another regularly occurring shortcoming is in relation to the official coordination bodies. And of course, the Convention calls for comprehensive and coordinated statewide policies addressing measures to prevent and combat all forms of violence covered by the Convention, and that these should be coordinated, implemented, monitored, and evaluated by one or more official coordinating bodies. Now, these official coordinating bodies should be institutionalized entities with clear mandates, powers, and competencies, and equipped with the necessary human and financial resources. And unfortunately, this is not always the case. And again, Denmark is one of the examples here, as well as Austria, for example, where the coordinating body takes the form of an interministerial ad hoc committee, which appears to not be sufficiently institutionalized, that its mandate might lack clarity, and that it's not resourced with a dedicated budget and staff which would allow it to carry out its duties adequately. Support services is another area where we still need to do a lot of work. We've seen, of course, a lot of progress in many states. However, still, overall, the number of special support services for victims of violence against women is still insufficient, and the funding tends to be extremely volatile in many countries. Another issue in relation to the support structures is the lack of geographical reach. And here, Denmark, together with several other countries, appear to have support services missing in the rural areas. And this would lead in practice to the exclusion of segments of the population. Child custody and visitation rights is another area. State parties tend to give priority to contact being maintained with both parents at all costs, regardless of the violence that the child may have witnessed. The withdrawal of parental authority of the violent parent remains very much the exception, despite the persistence of the danger to the mother and child. And again, in the state report on Denmark, GREVIO criticized the state's administration's practice to put visitation rights above the interests of the child in cases of domestic violence. I'm realizing that time is passing, so I'll just say mandatory mediation is another issue. And again, within the Danish report, there is some that says, well, it's quasi-mediation, it's quasi-mandatory mediation, not actually mandatory mediation. However, it has a similar effect. And the other area is protection orders. Denmark has exceptions to its protection orders, mainly in relation, again, to the child custody and access and visitation rights of parents to the child. Now, I feel a bit bad now because there was Niels telling you, hey, Denmark, you're great, and hey, Denmark, you're great. However, there are, a few places where you could be even greater, even greater. So please, do see this in that light. That is the light I'm giving it. You can be even greater. So I will just conclude very, very quickly. So as I've already said, the evaluation reports tend to demonstrate that the Convention has already had a tangible and positive impact on the various state parties. We still have challenges ahead, absolutely, including the need to improve the full implementation of the Convention in different areas. And we need to continue to demystify certain myths which are linked to the Istanbul Convention. Why? Because we want to protect women and girls in Europe, not only in Denmark or only in Malta, which is where I'm talking to you from, but in Europe from violence against women. And Grevio is fully committed, of course, both to demystifying and to continuing to improve the implementation. Fully committed on both of these fronts. One final word, what can we do? Again, Nils mentioned things that we can do in terms of promoting further the convention, and because at the end of the day, what is the convention? What's the whole point of the convention? I am here because I care. I am here because I care about the women, not just me as a woman, not just me and my friends and my family, but the women in Europe. And this is what the convention is about. The convention is about protecting those women. It is about preventing violence. It is about prosecuting perpetrators. And it is about having policies which are coordinated. So we need to bring forward the positive experiences of states who may already have benefited from being party to the convention, or both through the evaluation and through attempting to be prepared for the monitoring, which might still be about to take place. We need those states to be more active in support of the convention, to show with facts what the convention is about and the real change that it can produce. We need stronger, more vocal political engagement from the forces in governments who are supportive of the cause, which is defended by the Istanbul Convention. We need states to lead by example. We need them to show the cause of violence against women is not an imposition from an abstract entity called Europe, but it is something that is important and relevant for the women in each country. And allow me to remind you just one last time, this is a promise. The Istanbul Convention is the first legally binding instrument to provide for comprehensive measures addressing the prevention of violence against women, the protection of victims, the prosecution of perpetrators, and integrated policies. And that's why I am here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marceline, for these insights into your work on the Istanbul Convention. Your evaluation report on Denmark has indeed been very useful for our work here to push for consent-based legislation and a lot of other things. Now I would like to give the word to 𝗧𝗪𝗡, Director of Amnesty Poland, to give us a bit of insights on what's been happening in Poland in regards to the Istanbul Convention and other areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hal. Dear all, it's really an honor to be here in this, participate in this discussion, because not only this is one of the major issues right now in Poland, the questions connected with the Istanbul Convention, but also because it is very crucial to see that there is a much wider group of people who do care about human rights and women's rights also in other countries. Let me start this insight in situation in Poland with the problem of sexual violence. Because this is maybe one of those elements of the Istanbul Convention that is not so known in a Polish society, and it's not so present in a Polish debate, where while the other elements and the misinterpretation of the convention are very much part of the debate. So several weeks ago, a court in Poland overturned a rape verdict against a man who had sex with a 14-year-old girl and reduced his sentence. This 14-year-old girl, according to her testimonies, was raped by him, and she tried to resist. The situation happened. The rape happened several years ago, and she presented all the situation in a very comprehensive manner, and psychological experts also approved that her testimonies were very in compliance with everything was presented during this case. Nevertheless, judges deemed that rape didn't occur because the girl did not scream. And this story actually wake up a lot of people in Poland, and people realize that maybe there is something wrong with the definition of rape in the Polish criminal code. Maybe it's time to change it. Under Polish law, rape means to subject another person to sexual intercourse, to submit to another sexual act, or to perform such act using force, illegal threat, or deceit. We also presented in our shadow report ahead of a Gravio visit that will start next week in Poland, that some Polish scholars, legal scholars, also believe that for the crime of rape to be committed, the victim must actively and continuously resist or demonstrate their lack of consent by means of loud protest, request, or screaming. And here we can see the consequences of that kind of thinking in the story of that affected so badly this young woman, because she's now 20. In the opinion of other commentator, resistance must be manifestly real. So the prosecutors and very often the judges in a later stage concentrate on establishing whether the perpetrator used force, illegal threat, or deceit in order to overcome the victim's active resistance. This situation leads us that authorities very often focus not on survivor's absence of consent, but rather what was the level of opposition or resistance, how she communicated this resistance, and for how long. In one word, under Polish law, intercourse which takes place without the victim's consent, but also without the use of threat, deceit, or violence, is not considered a rape. Therefore, we can see that narrow approach to rape definition is not in line with the Istanbul Convention. As we know, Istanbul Convention requires the states to take the necessary legislative measures to ensure that all non-consensual acts of sexual violence, including rape, are criminalized. And the Convention provides that consent must be given voluntarily as a result of person's free will, assessed in the context of surrounding circumstances. And here is a question: why Convention, therefore, is not recognized in Poland as a proper tool to improve the situation of rape victims, but also to improve the situation of women who experience another types of violence. As you are probably very well aware, there is a strong opposition towards Istanbul Convention among right-wing parties in Poland, including a ruling opposition, including a ruling coalition. What we also learned for quite a while, Polish Episcopal Conference, the center organ of the Catholic Church in Poland, although they admit that fighting the violence against women is justified goal of the convention, said officially that they welcome the emergence of an initiative to withdraw the Istanbul Convention that was ratified by Poland in 2015. They explained their opposition to convention using the terms that were already mentioned before, such as gender ideology, or by misinterpretation that there is socially constructed identities that would be against biologically defined ones, and therefore there is a lot of myths around the convention in the Polish debate. The main point is that we are now facing in Poland's situation when there, in the same time, we are expecting the parliament to discuss two draconian bills. Both are civil initiatives that seek, one of them, to ban access to abortion in a case when there is a fatal damage of fetus, but also the one that would criminalize sexual education and equate homosexuality with pedophilia. We all know that in a country where the sexual and reproductive rights are already extremely limited, education about sexuality is crucial. Nevertheless, this is the state of play. As we emphasized in our shadow report for the Grevio, withdrawing from Istanbul Convention would be a retrogressive measure, and it would be actually disaster for the women's right, and not only for the women's right. So the question is, why these things are happening in Poland, and what is actually the reason that there is such a resist and opposition towards convention. I would like to emphasize that although there is very often argument of tradition and defending tradition used in this debate, it is the reason of the opposition towards convention in a completely different place. We can actually see that there is a strong will to get more power. There is a power struggle, and grabbing the power is actually the context in which this attack on the convention is taking place. But the attack on the document is going together with attack on the people, on the real people. And these threats towards already limited reproductive and sexual rights in Poland are going together with the demonization of LGBTI community. This is something that is very much connected with, of course, a recent presidential election campaign, when it was used as a tool in election campaign to show who is more devoted to so-called national and traditional values. And unfortunately, what we can see in the same time here, that it is not, it didn't end with the presidential election, and it's still here in place, and it's still part of the political narratives. My biggest fear right now is that we can get easily to the situation when the Grevio experts report can be undermined as something coming from abroad, something that is imposed to Polish society. So what I would see as a crucial step right now is, first of all, as was mentioned by Marcelina before, we are all here because we think human rights are important and women's rights are important. And we are all here because we believe that international cooperation is important and international standards of human rights are important. Because also what we could see is that in the situation when the people, both women rights defenders and LGBTI activists are targeted by public figures, by police, but also by unknown people on the street, that it is extremely important to show them international solidarity. It is extremely important to show that we stand with them shoulder to shoulder, but also it's very important to show that no country can treat their the people living in that country, either they are members of minority groups, either they are women rights activists, as a group that could be anyhow targeted by smear campaign. And this is something that is very often actually experienced by Polish activists, that the voices coming from abroad, voices of solidarity, are something that is really helpful and something that is really sending a clear message to Polish government and to Polish politicians that there is no silent consent on this approach that would actually marginalize and also threat the certain groups of people. My last point would be here that why situation in Poland is important and why it should matter.
Draginia,
yes.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry. I have to stop you now because I'm being told that we are running out of time. And thank you so much for your very insightful presentation. And please stay with us for the panel debate. Now I will give very, very short time to 𝗧𝗢𝗪𝗡, Danish MEP from the Greens, and after that, Mette-Marie, if I can ask you to be very brief, so we also have time for a short debate. 𝗧𝗢𝗪𝗡, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can see me. My own screen is frozen for my picture, but I hope it works for you. No, first of all, thank you. Okay, I will see what I can do to fix it again then. But I just wanted to say thank you for all the information. It's really nice to get all these inputs as well. And just some few comments from me that I think what we're also facing now is like a political battle between values. So we see in particular the right wing and the new conservatives using gender and using gender equality and women's rights as a primary battleground. And I think we have to be aware of this fight between values and where our society should go in order to foster progressive and rights-based development. And I think also, it was really right what the two first speakers said on how Denmark is doing this, and I think we really need to take on our international leadership in pushing forward for human rights and democracy in the world, and also in Denmark itself. And I just wanted to say some few words on what we're doing at an EU level right now. So first of all, we're calling for EU to implement the different aspects of the Istanbul Convention within the next couple of years, if the governments don't do it ourselves. So instead of, like, if we can't succeed with the member states ratifying it, the EU will actually go in and have committed to take some actions to then implement the different elements into EU legislation, so we can still secure people. And then we're also working on an ILO convention on sexual harassment at work, which I think is also an important aspect. But I think I won't say that much more, so we have time for the questions and the debates. But thank you very much for all the information. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us and for the work you do. Mette-Marie?
Yes, good afternoon. I shall do my best to be brief. I'm putting on a timer, so I'll stop after 3 minutes. My name is Mette-Marie. I work for the organization DANA, and we do run a shelter. We have other services as well. We are not the biggest, but we are the oldest shelter in Denmark. And I just want to say to you, to Marcelina, that I'll be less kind I do not think Denmark is doing great. I think women's rights and equality is an absolute, not a relative thing. So although there are places in the world where women and girls have it much tougher, there's still a lot to do in Denmark. I'm sort of inspired a little bit by this whole COVID situation. Simone de Beauvoir points out that it just takes one crisis to roll back what we have gained in terms of women's rights and equalities. And we have also seen that during this global calamity. But there are other sort of forces at play, and you have just discussed some of them. The pushbacks we see in a lot of countries, and maybe the importance of the Istanbul Convention has never been greater than at this point. If I zoom into on Denmark, I recently saw, it was an old survey from 2014, where they have asked the citizens of EU countries a lot of questions. And in Denmark, 71% agreed to the statement that provocative behavior from the woman was the cause of domestic violence. And the EU average on that was 52. So there is something, I wrote here, something rotten in Denmark, but there's something interesting in a Danish context that does not match our self-image and the image we have around the world as a very gender equal country. Because when it comes to violence against women, it is not looked upon as a gender equality issue in the general public. The structural causes are not included in their understanding of the phenomenon, and it's looked upon as more an issue of conflict between individuals. And there's been this gender neutralization of the issue, which is problematic in many different ways. So there's still a lot to do. When I looked at the baseline, I see we still need the sex aggregated data in Denmark. We need to improve the rights and the freedom of some minority women, both in terms of their relationship to the perpetrators, but also to authorities in Denmark. And the legislation we have that actually, for some migrant women, is a barrier for actually seeking the protection they are entitled to under the Istanbul Convention because they do not have permanent residency. Key authority professionals still not have the knowledge they need to actually understand the structural causes and dynamics characterizing the violence. And as you also mentioned, the custody system is still failing women and children traumatized by violence. And just finally, and I've reached my 3 minutes, but an issue that is at the very forefront of where we are putting our efforts today is femicide. This is something that has been completely absent from the Danish debate. Although 12 women per year are killed by their partner, ex-partner, and it is the only type of killing or murder that has not decreased in the past 25 years. It's staying at the same level. And we actually know a lot about how we can prevent it, because there are a lot of knowledge around this issue. Most of the time, violence has been it has been a violent relationship, but still there has been no political will or from other parties to do something about it. So we have to do better on this. But just finally, all is not bad. In the past 18 months, Denmark has criminalized psychological violence or coercive control, and we're in the process of adopting the consent-based rape legislation. And these were actually two issues that were pointed out in the Grevio report, or the baseline report from 2017. That was it for now.
Thank you so much, Mette Marie. I just wanted to remind you all that you are very welcome to post questions in the chat. But while we wait for that, I would like to ask the panel one question. What are your thoughts or analysis on what can be done to counter this current backlash that we are seeing in some parts of Europe in regards to the Istanbul Convention and more broadly to women's rights from different stakeholders and as well from your own talking point or the organization you represent today? Thank you. We can start maybe with you, Mette Marie.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think there are some sort of structural sort of forces at play with what we talked about now with the national conservative wave, there's also a sort of we are increasingly living in individualized societies where things are looked upon from an individual level, not a structural level. So I think we're up against some very strong forces, but I think there are also some very progressive things happening. At the same time, there's a parallel process of an awakening and an increase in maybe not in Denmark yet, but in a lot of countries where being a feminist is looked upon as a positive thing. In Denmark, maybe it's more of a negative thing still, but let's keep pushing for that agenda to be taken in. I think at the political level, I think there's it's increasingly a divisive issue, which is, finding solutions for that really requires some political will. So I think at a political level, there's lots to be done, and it's an important issue that is dealt with at that level. But I think as an organization such as mine, which is focused on gender equality and the combating violence against women, I think sort of continually using the knowledge we gain from our work with these women and putting that out there in the public sphere to enlighten, and also I think from a meso level to, as also recommended by the Gregory report, that institutions and key authority figures actually get more knowledge. So we have to address the issue both from above and from below, but also from the inside, so to speak. So I think we have to really work on a lot of different levels to return the backlash.
Thank you so much, Mette Marie. I'll pass the word on to you, Kira, because I know you have to go shortly.
Yes, thank you. No, I really agree with what Mette Marie said. So I think I will say what we can do from an EU level. I think what is one of the most important steps is, of course, to push for the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, but also to secure an EU directive on gender-based violence and push the member states to secure rights for women who are victims of abuse. And then I think also an aspect that is maybe more national, but can also be done from a European level, is the cause of education. So ensuring that we're all educated in understanding our own rights and boundaries, and also understand how we don't overstep other people's boundaries. And then the whole aspect of funding and supporting grassroots movements and NGOs and the organizations working in the different countries with protection of women, I think is a really important aspect. So we also support like from a bottom-up perspective. And then I think an aspect that we maybe don't talk that much about, but it's also important, is the whole area of cross-border criminality. So that your rights are also secured in other EU member states if you move around and have to move from a violent partner, that you're also protected when you move to a new country. I think that's some of the aspects I think is important to do.
Thank you very much, Kira. Then I will give the word to you, Niels.
Yes, well, what can we do? I think, first of all, people can join the campaign organized by Amnesty International, Yes Means Yes, not only in Denmark, but elsewhere, to promote, to reform rape laws across Europe. There's an urgent need to do this because there are very few countries in Europe that have consent-based rape laws, only 9 out of 31 countries, according to my researchers. But I think that there's also some excellent work being done by my colleagues in human rights education, integrating issues pertaining to domestic violence and the Istanbul Convention into human rights education. So not only talking about education more broadly, but to mainstream this into human rights education. Some governments stepped up during COVID and came up with innovative solutions to deal with domestic violence, creating new hotlines, doing special outreach work, putting women victims in hotels and so on and so forth. But overall, the situation for women, I think, has deteriorated massively during COVID, and we have to think hard to have a recovery that is just not only for everybody, but especially prioritizes women to regain the lost ground during COVID. But I also like Kira's mention of what can be done at the European level, at the European Union, Council of Europe. I mean, the European institutions can have huge influence if they put their money behind these efforts. And I think we have to think, well, maybe the European Union won't ratify the Istanbul Convention in the near future, but what else can it do with its resources, with its research, with its education, to promote this agenda of equality and safety and autonomy and dignity for women?
Thank you very much, Niels. So very briefly from Marceline and 𝗧𝗪𝗡 before we unfortunately have to end this very interesting debate. Marceline?
Thank you, Helle. What can be done? Well, I've already said things like we need forces within the governments that are in favor of the Istanbul Convention, that support the Istanbul Convention, to come out more strongly. I've always really believed in I'm going to use the word unity, which is not quite the right word, but in linking. I think that there are, even in states that are overall not in favor of the Istanbul Convention, there are still politicians there who are actually in favor. So we need to link better in order to strengthen better the voices that are promoting the Istanbul Convention. Again, not because I'm Grevio, not because it's the Istanbul Convention, but because we're talking about the lives, we're talking about human lives, women's lives, women and children who are suffering as a result. The other thing I would like to mention, again, and it would be good to, there is some, but to further link, again, to strengthen is, we have also seen strong reactions on the ground. We've had amazing demonstrations in Poland, for example, women's demonstrations, and in many other countries, not only in Europe, but even beyond, in Mexico, in South Africa, you know, who are protesting precisely about femicides, about violence against women, about women's rights. I think we need to see those as well, and we need to give them more prominence to get the message across, and again, where possible, to link. I'll stop there because I'm aware that I did take too much time before. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. 𝗧𝗪𝗡, 1 minute for you, and then I'll round off.
Very quickly, I do echo about hello? I do echo what just Marcelina said, the importance of space for women activists who are demonstrating and showing their power on the street. This is extremely important to make them visible and to share their message. And in the same time, very, very pragmatic way I would approach the Denmark experience in efforts to change the legislation on sexual violence, but also experience in combating domestic violence. These are the things that are very important to learn more broadly, not only in a short report or comparing the statistics. So I would say that we can really fight the myths and the misinterpretation around the domestic violence and around the Istanbul Convention, using the real experience and using the real stories from the real life. Because, as I said, the attack on convention goes together to attack on the real people.
Thank you so much, 𝗧𝗪𝗡. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation as well, for listening into this debate. Marceline, I really liked what you said about linking. I think it's also one of the reasons why we are now looking at a future consent-based law in Denmark after working for this for decades from survivor activists and women organizations in Denmark, is because we have been able to link with progressive forces within parliament, within prosecution, within all the institutions as well. So as a Danish feminist activist, I'm leaving this debate with a lot of hope for the future. listening to all of you and all the amazing work that is being done all around Europe. Thank you for speaking today, and thank you for listening in. On behalf of Amnesty International, Danish Women's Council, and 𝗧𝗪𝗡, thank you so much, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.